So, as I was saying, we've had over 80 asynchronous views, and I'm sure we'll get more. Today, we're going to look at setting pricing with Mark from Business Link. This is the 5th of 5 workshops, so you're welcome to go back and watch them all as you find time, and review them and watch them more than once. This is the maiden voyage. Is that correct, Mark, of this workshop?
That's correct. Yeah.
Excellent. We're honored to be the conduit. Mark is going to do about 40 minutes of information share, and then he's going to walk you through a calculator of sorts, which he will make available to all of you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark and mute myself and just monitor the chat in the lobby, and enjoy yourselves. Eat your lunch, drink your coffee, and have fun.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. Yeah, very happy to be back here. I was happy to be here last week talking about financing, and yeah, excited to share this new presentation we've been developing with you all. So my name is Mark Shields. I'm one of the small business strategists at Business Link. I will say that we're going to be going through kind of some accounting concepts here today. So by all means, if you have any questions, please do ask away. I'm more than happy to work through that, especially with this perhaps being our first time sharing this content. If anything's not coming through quite clearly, don't be afraid to ask me to elaborate or to explain it a bit differently. I myself am not a professional accountant, just to make clear. I am kind of training to become one, I can say. But yeah, if there, we'll get to points where I'll just sort of identify, if this isn't quite enough for the complexity of your particular business, talking to an accountant will be where you'd want to go to kind of move this further. So what we want to do today is give you, a tool to give you a stronger idea of where you're at with your costs and what that means for your price, and how the amount you're selling is going to contribute to profit, basically. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to somewhat briefly just describe Business Link as a whole, and then we'll dive right into our content. So with Business Link, we are Alberta's entrepreneurial hub. We serve all of Alberta, and we're here to help any and all business owners, from people who just have an idea for a business to those who've been operating for years and years. We're here to help in any way that they need. So you can reach out to us and with whatever that question is or challenge you're facing, and we'll do our best to help you out and point you in the right direction to move forward. Our goal at the end of the day is simply to foster great Alberta businesses. And we do that in a variety of ways. So I'd say our primary way is through business advisory services. So that's where you can meet with a strategist such as myself to be one-on-one. We're going to discuss your business very specifically, whatever that challenge is that you're facing or that question you have. We can do this in a single meeting, might even just be an email if that's all it takes. On the other side, it might be an ongoing relationship. We're more than happy to continue meeting with people, sometimes even on a regular basis, in almost like a coaching context, to make sure that your business is moving forward. And as long as you're seeing value in that and we're seeing progress, that can be very much ongoing. It's really important to us that we be able to make referrals to other actors and other service providers within the entrepreneurial and business ecosystem. Community Futures being a great example of that. We love working with all the various Community Futures offices throughout Alberta. Lots of different service providers as well. So if we're not exactly the correct organization to be giving you the information you need, we do our very best to make sure we're on top of who we can refer you to and make sure you're connected. Our business support services will encompass things like our secondary market research reports. So you can request a report from our research team, and they'll provide you with a whole bunch of secondary information. So information from databases, essentially. Really useful program. Again, no cost to use an entrepreneur. Nothing I've talked about here so far has any cost to you. We have our expert program. This is one that does carry a small nominal fee of $29, which is just essentially to ensure you show up for the appointment, where you can meet with a lawyer, accountant, or often other business professionals as well. That program actually is going through a little bit of a revamp. So if accessing an expert of any kind is something you need, please do reach out, and we will help make sure you get connected one way or another. Things like business plan templates, we can review your business plan. And then in our last section, our educational services, basically such as we're engaged in right now, sharing with the public different pieces that are going to help them on their entrepreneurial journey. Check out our networking events, our newsletter, and such. All that will be really helpful for you, we hope. We found it valuable to highlight a couple programs we have. So we have a team on our staff that deals specifically with Indigenous entrepreneurs and Indigenous business owners. And part of that team does procurement support. They help those Indigenous-owned businesses to become ready to or engage in the bidding process for federal procurement contracts. That's something that we've been able to take some learnings from and apply to our clientele generally. So again, if that's something you're kind of curious in, it's not what we're going to talk about today, but we can definitely help you with that at BusinessLink if that's something of interest. And then similarly with our immigrant entrepreneur program, again, a staff member who specifically goes out to interact with and engage the immigrant community. So while the advice that's provided in these programs isn't different or unique, because starting a business is starting a business, they're created with the intention of making sure that there's full engagement in those communities and helping them to the greatest extent possible. All right. So with that, going into our material. So essentially, we're going to talk about this from a cost perspective. We want to explore what it means to understand the costs that your business is incurring and how knowing that information is going to be really valuable in helping you set your price. And we'll look at some strategies for price. And then we're going to look at this bit of additional cost. I'll get into what I mean by that in a moment. That'll help you determine what your business's profit may be. So that's hopefully a good overview. By the end of this presentation, it's my goal to help you be able to know and list your variable and fixed costs. More or less, we want to get pretty comprehensive there. We want you to be able to calculate your break-even point. So we're going to look at, as Mike had said there, a tool that's going to help you with that. You want to be aware of some different strategies for arriving at the price for your product or service. So there's different ways we can approach that, but all of it is going to be cost fundamental to it. And then really we want you to be able to understand how adjustments or let's say changes to your price or changes to the cost in your business and also changes to the amount that you're producing or providing is going to affect your profit. So again, our tool will show us that. All right, so it all starts with how much is this costing me? What we mean here, or we're going to talk about first, is our variable costs. So I'm going to put this a few different ways. How much is it costing you to provide your specific product or service? So by that we mean direct costs. What costs actually go directly into the product you're making or selling or the service that you're providing? One way we can understand variable costs is that these costs are going to change. This is where the word variable comes from. They're going to vary or change depending on how much of the product or the service is produced or provided. I'm going to be I want to be kind of cautious with our language here about product and service. All of this that I'm going to talk about today applies to both. So if you catch me talking about producing a product in one context or providing a service in another, just understand that they're interchangeable here. So yeah, there can be a little confusion around that, but the same logic will apply in both contexts. So there are some pretty easy ways to describe what our variable costs are most typically. We have materials, so that this is specific to if you're producing a good, you're going to have some materials in that, or if you're not producing, maybe you've got an inventory and you're selling goods, like a convenience store selling their confectionaries, you have got a purchase cost for that item, right? So what is that costing? What is it costing you to get the physical thing? There's also the labor that's going to be involved. So again, if we're making something, maybe you're making soap, for example, bars of soap, how much time does it take you or whoever's in your business is doing that production to complete that process? You know, what's the time frame for that, and what's it costing? We can also think a bit about what equipment and facilities you need. I'm going to explain that with a bit more detail when we get to our tool. So I want to set it aside, if you will indulge me with that for a moment. And we're going to think predominantly at this moment about the materials and the labor that's involved in providing your good or service, and then a couple other things that might vary along with those sales. So if there's any questions, I'll remind you this a couple times, but if you have questions or anything I'm saying here is like, oh, I don't know what that word means, or I don't know the lingo here, please do let me know and I can try to clarify. So what can perhaps help is just to give some examples of what a variable cost would be. So if we're a restaurant that's, let's say we're a breakfast diner, and one of our items on our menu is scrambled eggs. This is the one we're going to walk through in the example a little bit later. So our variable costs, we're going to use some ingredients there. If I don't sell any scrambled eggs that day, I don't have to buy any eggs. I don't have that cost. So that's going to be one of my variable costs. With our labor here, again, we'll find this kind of throughout. Not every cost is going to fit very perfectly and easily into this category or the other category fixed costs we'll discuss in a moment. We want to make our best judgment. So if this is a diner that's got the ability to call in its chefs as they need, or maybe we kind of can think of like a pizza delivery in this example. How many deliveries do they have to make? You're only going to pay them per delivery. So that's variable. If there's no deliveries going out that day, then you don't have to pay that delivery driver. That cost is zero. It varies depending on the volume there. If you're providing a service, we're probably more so thinking about the time it takes to create. You may, though, have something like a commission on sales. So this, again, is going to be driven by the volume here. So if you sell nothing, you pay that commission salesperson nothing in theory. Again, in reality, we often have a bit of a blend there, but yeah, we're going to do this essentially theoretically if you'll kind of carry along with me that way, and then we can discuss a bit more about some practicalities a little later. But we want to use the theories to illustrate the concepts. The bottom line, variable costs will rise and fall based on the amount you're making or the amount of service you're providing. So once we determine that, and again, our tool is going to show us how we would calculate how much it's costing for each unit of sale. So each time you sell a product or service. Once we've determined that, now we can start to look at what is our price going to need to be, and what strategy might I utilize to set the best price for the market that I'm operating in. So this pricing strategies, as you can probably imagine, can get pretty granular. We're going to look at a variety here that I think are commonly seen, and I would some of them are commonly utilized among our entrepreneurs, so small businesses, and then the concept of psychological pricing to kind of wrap up there. So I'll use an example as I go through each of these. Let's imagine we've got a snow removal service. So Mark's snow removal business is going to set our pricing strategy. One strategy that you may come across if you're researching this is going to be market penetration. What we mean by that is that this is a company that's using a strategy of its price to obtain market share. They're trying to get as many people to become their customers as possible. So what essentially we mean here is that the price is being set below the cost to the company. This is probably not, I feel safe in saying that, probably not a strategy that's going to be recommended for a small business. Here we're thinking more so those large businesses. Uber is a great example here. at the start, certainly, and maybe even to this day, will enter markets and lose money on each ride that they provide. Even though you're paying for that ride in an Uber, Uber itself is actually losing money on that. It's costing them more than you're paying. But their hope is that they're going to accumulate so many riders that the price can rise someday, and they can move into profitability. So strategy that I think bears mentioning, because depending on the industry you're in, you might perhaps be facing a competitor that's utilizing this strategy, but it might not be one you necessarily take on yourself. A cost-driven pricing strategy is where we're looking at providing our good for the lowest possible without going into negative numbers. So here, this is a strategy where perhaps you feel that your product is really not got a competitive advantage that much over any other competitor in the marketplace. So you're just striving to provide it for the lowest cost possible. There's some risk in this strategy. For one thing, it means that to cover your fixed costs, again, that we'll see in a moment, or to create profitability in your business, you need to sell a lot. So this is typically a strategy employed by a company that can produce a large amount of good or service. So it might be something you're exploring, but what is probably the most common pricing strategy that we see among small businesses is what we might refer to as a value-driven pricing. So not trying to go to the lowest possible number, but instead setting a margin of profitability. These terms are a little formal. You'll see what I mean by that later. But you determine how much profit you want each sale to provide you. And your price being set a little higher now is going to be augmented, or it's going to be augmented in your marketing strategy by the extra value that you are able to provide over that lower cost option. So that is, in itself, kind of one version of psychological pricing, but another, we can sort of take that a little bit deeper here, and I'll give some examples of what we mean by that. There's, a lot of study and a lot of research that goes into, how a price itself can impact consumers' buying decision. So some examples that we'll all be very familiar with are the idea of making something worth X number of dollars and 99 cents. So this is derived from an understanding that psychologically you're interpreting that price as lower than $4 rather than higher than $4. If it's $3.99, looks lower than $4 and no cents. That's an example there. Another thing that we might see a lot is in food service. So our small, medium, large size drinks at a fast food restaurant, our large is perhaps being priced in such a way to give people a feeling that they're getting a better deal, sort of, or they're paying for the better version. And then on that lower end, maybe it's more the bargain hunters that are finding that appealing. So having, if you're in a business where you're able to provide multiple services or multiple products, thinking about how different levels can give people who are making their purchasing decisions based on different psychologies, it can increase the total number of customers you have patronizing your business. So if we kind of think about it within our snow removal example, at market penetration, this snow removal company Poly's got a lot of capital built up that they can go out there and provide a bunch of snow removal to the market at a below market rate, so lower than all their competitors, and they're hoping to get as many new customers as possible. If they're cost driven, they're just going to look for the lowest possible amount they can charge and still make a profit, and try to market to as many customers as possible. They're going to be driven by volume here. Again, it's going to take probably more investment. If our snow removal businesses choosing a value-driven pricing. They're going to, in their messaging to customers, talk about the perhaps immediacy of the service they can provide, or find some other kind of competitive advantage that makes them more appealing and more valuable to the customer than the cost-driven competitor, and therefore justify the higher price. All right. So carrying on, we want to then take that cost information we've derived, and then we've kind of started to settle on a pricing strategy, and we want to conduct a bit of market research. So once we know what it's costing us to provide our good, and we can go out and see what our average prices our competitors are charging for either the same or similar good or service, that's going to help us understand which decision we need to make here. We've already kind of talked about it a little bit. Do you need to compete on price? Do you need to make these numbers as close to each other as possible, or kind of drive that total cost as low as possible? Maybe, but maybe not. That's something that is worth exploring, something that we, our strategist team at BusinessLink, are very happy to help explore with you specifically in one of our one-on-one sessions. So please do reach out if that's of interest to you. It is worth saying that the lower your costs can be, or the lower you can make your costs, the more flexibility you're going to have here. So that's pretty axiomatic, I think, or just an obvious thing about doing business. That we want to keep our costs as low as possible, but we're going to see how studying some numbers can help you do that more effectively, kind of lower those costs, or see where the costs are coming from. And then really important in the end, if you do kind of choose to go with that competitive pricing and competing with price being your main advantage, you just want to really be asking yourself, is this going to be sustainable in the long run? Can you be profitable? So again, get to our tool and hopefully illustrate that a little more. So very briefly here, just a little nod to our market research service and how our strategists can help you with market research. So really important to do that when you're arriving at your pricing strategies. We're not going to dive too much into that today because we want to keep this focused a bit more on the number crunching, but absolutely market research is crucial, and it's something we very much can help with. So please do reach out and find out how we can augment and improve your business's market research. All right, the next thing that's really important to determine here is our capacity. How many items can you produce? How many times can you provide this service? If you're a cleaning company that provides residential cleaning, and if it's just yourself, you're a solopreneur, what is really realistically the maximum number of houses you can possibly clean in a day? If they're all right next to each other on the same block, you're going as fast as you can and not taking lunch break, like what is that maximum capacity? And then from there, maybe thinking a bit more practically, what is a realistic capacity? It's not likely all your customers are going to be lined up in a row, so maybe you've got some driving time. You're probably going to lose a couple houses that way. It's important to know this and have a realistic understanding of what your overall capacity is to either make your item or to provide your service. And one more, once again, if you're an inventory kind of company where you're buying and reselling another thing, their capacity may be more, the constraint on your capacity might be more just your purchasing ability. How much money do you have available to purchase your inventory? So we'll hopefully be able to get a pretty good estimate of that. And that is what leads us to our ability to do some number analysis here. What we will refer to as our cost, volume, profit, or CVP analysis. What you need to be able to do this are actuals or estimates. So if you don't have an actual number, you can still do this with your best estimate. We need to know what you anticipate your price will be, what you figure your unit costs or those variable costs are, and what the number of units you expect to sell. So either times you provide the service or items sold. once we have that, our final piece of the puzzle here is our what we would call our fixed costs. If you remember, variable costs are those ones that go up and down depending on how much we're selling. Well, our fixed costs are costs that we have no matter what happens with our sales or our production. So if we look at our scrambled eggs again, this diner is going to be paying rent to a landlord for the place that they're providing their scrambled eggs. That's a fixed cost. Whether the landlord isn't concerned with whether they have 0 customers or 10,000 customers in the month, they're charging that rent no matter what. If you're in that service business, again, we're thinking that graphic designer, probably a lot fewer fixed costs there, and would typically be the case, but they are not totally absent most of the time. So maybe it's something like a professional liability insurance policy that's got monthly premiums. That's a fixed cost. You're going to be paying that. It's irrelevant to whether you sell more or less. All right, I'll just quickly ask, so is that, does that lead to any questions? Nothing in the chat yet. If you do have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat there. I'm more than happy to elaborate or clarify anything. But if it's all coming through and making sense, I'll carry on. So with all that information, one really key and important thing that probably every business is dying to know, or wants to know, well, it's very much within your ability to determine what your break even is. Just to make sure we are all on the same page there, when we say break even, what we in fact are saying is that this business's profit at that point is 0. They're not losing any money, they're not making any money. So once you get out of the negative numbers and get to 0, we would say that this company has broken even. And now every sale beyond that point is going to be a profit. So yeah, just reiterating there, negative numbers in this regard would be a loss, positive numbers are a profit. This can be expressed formulaically. So again, trying to, as best we can, to avoid math here, but unfortunately in this particular context can't be avoided completely. But this is what our equation would look like. If we set ourselves at $0 in terms of our profit, then we would calculate that by however many of the units we have, what we expect we're going to sell, times our margin, and that's what we're going to explore in just a moment, but essentially it's the difference between our price and those variable costs. We multiply those two numbers together, and then we subtract our total fixed cost. So our break-even point can be expressed as this number here, the number of units that you need to sell. All right. So another way to visualize this is to see it on a graph. So I'll just describe these 3 lines here. Our sales, so every time you sell a unit, that's represented on our red line. So you sell your first unit, and that's going to bring you up to a certain number of dollars in revenue. Our flat line there, our horizontal black line, is what would be our fixed costs. So that's totaling up our rent, our insurance, our salaries, if those are fixed, all those fixed costs we have brings us up to a certain dollar number. And then everything beyond that, our purple line, is our variable costs per unit. So every time you sell that scrambled eggs, it's costing you something, but you're earning a little bit more in profit. Our break-even point is where these 2 lines come together. So what number of units does the total sales we have equal the total costs that we've incurred? So anything beyond that point, any unit we sell past that, we see our red line is above our purple line, which is our total cost. That's profit. So we can use this same formula if we, for example, say we want to target earning a profit of $50,000. So maybe you've determined, again, you're just a solopreneur running your own small business independently, and you determine, well, I'd like to earn $50,000 in profit this year. That will cover my living expenses. I'll pay myself that in the dividend, whatever it might be. If we set that in our equation, again, we can determine how many items we need to sell in order to achieve that level of profit. So same exact math, we've just changed the number 0, which would be our break even, to our target profitability. So now any of these variables within that equation can be changed, and it'll have an impact on the others. Again, this is our mathematical concept, but we're going to see this demonstrated in a moment. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to know what it's going to do to your profitability if you drop the price of your product by 50 cents? That'll be really useful information to have. If those variable costs increase by 45 cents, so what happens then? How much money am I going to lose? Will I still be profitable? Will I be at a loss stage if that happens? We need to do the calculation to figure this out. If our fixed costs go up, what is that going to do to the situation? If the number we sell is higher or lower than we expected, where's that going to put us? So all of this is going to be able to, having a formula and a tool, this calculator that I'm going to share with you, is going to help you understand what's feasible, because you'll be able to kind of pull these levers, so to speak, and see what the impacts are going to be based on different perhaps decisions you make, or impacts of things beyond your control. You might be able to anticipate a little bit better this way. So with that, I'm going to jump to showing our tool. So I just want to confirm if someone can give me a quick little yes, that's we see the Excel spreadsheet now instead of the PowerPoint. Is that the case? Yeah, even just a quick little comment in the chat there, just to confirm that yes, you're able to see the Excel sheet. Yes, okay, thank you, Reza, appreciate that. All right. So yes, we've created this spreadsheet, which, as we said, we'll be making available to you to utilize. I'm just going to walk through how you can put it to your use, what the different information is. So again, I want to just reiterate what somebody said at the start there. This may not be fully suitable to the complexity of your business. For example, if you're selling a whole bunch of different products, this might be this will still be, I think, insightful, but not quite as useful. It certainly would be possible if you had the interest to work through it in more detail with an accountant, with a CPA. But yeah, so I just want to give that as a bit of a caveat. This is somewhat theoretical, but I still want to be able to show you how the numbers are going to be. So just to start, so you can keep track of things, we can enter the product name here or the service name. We're going to work through scrambled eggs as an example. So our diner sells scrambled eggs is one of the items on their menu. So you'll see down here on the bottom are several tabs. We're going to start with materials. Now, materials, again, are only going to be relevant to businesses that are producing a good or selling a good. If you have an inventory, then your cost per unit, this last number here, is something you would just hard put in here, because you would likely know exactly what it costs you per unit that you're purchasing. The rest of these are for determining that if it's something that's being essentially manufactured. So again, if you're making bars of soap or you're making leather wallets, that kind of thing, or craft type of stuff, you'll need to use the calculation numbers here. If you're providing a service, it's likely you don't have anything at all here. You may be using some materials in your service. So perhaps I'm printing a report that I'm going to provide. So I'm using paper. Yes, that's a material. We would think of that more as either an overhead, or for our purpose today, we might put that in the fixed cost. Unless you need to provide it for every single job, then you can put that here as well. So there's going to be a bit of judgment you have to make. I'll be more than happy to go through this for any of you who are in attendance today. Specifically, if you're interested and you want to reach out to me, but at the very end here, I'll give you my contact information. But all that being said, let's go through how this will work for this example. So one thing I know I'm going to need is eggs, of course. I might want to have cheese in my omelet, perhaps, mushrooms, maybe some other vegetables. We'll use 3 because that's enough to kind of illustrate what's happening here. But just note, of course, put any of the materials that are going to go into making your item, list them all here. So this, is a business that's buying its materials, let's just say from the grocery store. Again, for simplicity's sake, that might not be the case. Maybe you're buying from a supplier, you're getting volume discounts, this kind of thing. So in that case, this would be, you just want to be paying attention to how much you pay per order and what the volume is you get. But if I'm going to the grocery store, perhaps I can get these eggs for $3.69, and for that I get 12 of them. So I get 12 eggs. That means each egg costs me 31 cents. Maybe I pay $6.99 for a block of cheese, and that block of cheese has 700 grams in it. So I pay 1 cent per gram for cheese. Mushrooms, similarly, $4. Maybe I get 250 grams. There's my price per gram. Now, the next step is how much of these items are going into each plate of scrambled eggs that I'm serving. Well, maybe I put 3 eggs in each dish. Maybe I put 100 grams of cheese in, and I put 50 grams of mushrooms into each omelet. In this case, because I'm talking about just one plate, I'm going to put 1 for each of these. If, for example, again, I'm producing something like bars of soap, I like that as an example, I might be producing 100 bars of soap at the same time. So my materials used would be X number of liters of oil, and that makes me or allows me to produce 100 bars of soap. So that's important to note here too. That you want to pay attention to how much material you're using per how much you're making. It is going to calculate for you then the number, the cost per unit. So we can now determine that based on the numbers we've inputted, it's costing us 92 cents for our eggs, $1 for our cheese, and 80 cents for our mushrooms, for a total of $2.72 going into this, this product. But that's just our first step. We also want to put in our labor used. Now, again, our scrambled eggs example here helps us highlight how some of these costs are not always perfectly easy to determine. So, in our example here, if this is a really busy restaurant where our cook in the kitchen is constantly making dishes, then maybe it's variable. We would also need to be able to, again, send that cook home if there was nothing being sold. So in reality, maybe our cook in the kitchen, he's got to be there, he or she has to be there for the full 8-hour shift. That might be something you put in a fixed cost. So just keeping that in mind. But because I want to be able to illustrate this example, we'll continue with the theory, or with the caveat that this particular diner has the ability to send home and call in their labor as the orders come. So if my chef or my cook is there for 4 hours through the morning, let's say, and I pay that salary or that wage to that cook of $16, then I would want to put in how many units he or she would typically be producing in that 4 hours. So if they produce, let's say 20 per hour, so 80 plates. Maybe that's a little bit high. Let's change that to 60. So we're paying now, instead of just thinking about it $16 per hour, we can also express this as what we're paying this individual per unit of scrambled eggs. We're paying them $1.07. I do want to mention overhead here briefly. So again, to be including your business's overhead in this calculation is valuable. I've determined it's a little too complex for what we're trying to convey here today. So I'm going to encourage you to kind of add do one of three things with your overhead costs. Figure out whether it fits in a variable to an extent. So again, something like that paper example, which would typically be overhead but could be variable. With our scrambled eggs, maybe it's oil that's being used in the pan, right? We use oil for all the different things on the menu, not just scrambled eggs. It's overhead. Maybe we just put that in our fixed costs. Or you can just calculate those things that don't fit nicely into either and put them here as a way to just remind yourself that they exist. We don't want to forget about those. But instead of including it in our actual calculation, which would just require going into too much depth and detail, I've determined if you really want to do that for your business, which again, like I said, can be extremely valuable, it would be advisable to engage a CPA to do that work either with you or for you. But yeah, so that bears mentioning. If there was any overhead costs, you can either calculate it here or try to have it fit into either variable or fixed. So having said that, we'll move on to our fixed cost. So again, our restaurant here has some fixed costs for sure. So they've got rent, which is $1,000. We're going to do this on a per year basis. You can do this per month if you want. You just want to, all these data points you want to be entering with a month in mind rather than a year. So we'll do for the year. If they're paying $1,500 for rent per month, there's 12 months in the year, $18,000 for rent. A couple other things, they've probably got some insurance, as we've mentioned before. That's maybe $2,000 for the year, and then a manager's salary. And then manager, let's say, well, maybe they're part-time on the weekends. We pay them in total $30,000. So that gives us $50,000 in our fixed costs. So these are costs that this business has to pay regardless of what happens. So whether they sell nothing or they sell everything, this $50,000 stays the same. Again, there's probably more here, but this, for the sake of our example, we'll pause there. So now we have inputted all of our cost data. Just a quick review. We've seen our materials per unit, $2.72. We've got our labor per unit, $1.07, and we've got our fixed costs. We have $50,000 we have to pay each year. That's got to come out of our scrambled egg sales. My next tab here for sales is going to start to collect some of this information. So we see here the summary. We've got our materials and our labor, which gives us our total cost per unit at this point of $3.79. One thing that I think is important is we want to think a bit about transaction fees. So if people are paying you with a credit card through a Monera system and you're being charged a percentage of each transaction, or something like Square as well, we take a percentage of each transaction. If you have that and you know what that percentage is, let's say it's 3%, you can enter that in this square here. From there, we have our price, and this goes back to our pricing strategy. So you would want to choose one or the other of these, either a desired markup, and that's going to be, again, a percentage. We're going to look at our $3.79, and we're going to say we want a profit margin, sometimes called a contribution margin, of 30%. So maybe that's an industry standard, maybe that's some, we've determined that for another reason, but we can put that 30% here. You could also, if you chose, let's say we're just price matching to the diner down the street, and we know that down the street there they charge $6 for their plate, or $5.99. We can input that part to that market standard number there if we chose to do that. So you'll want to do one or the other. Let's stick with our markup here. So we want to mark our product up by 30%. That means that our price is going to be $4.92, or maybe we round that up to $4.99. And essentially then that means that our contribution margin, this number here, is the amount of dollars from each sale of eggs that's going towards that $50,000 fixed cost. So that's what we're essentially going to use to determine our break even and our profitability. The last thing we need to put in here is how many we're expecting to sell. So This will vary a lot depending on what kind of business you have. Maybe you're like a real estate agent, might only sell a dozen houses a year, or less perhaps, maybe a lot more. So if you want to hard input the number of units that you anticipate selling in the period, you can put that right into this number here. If, again, you're in that retail context and it's easier to think about this on a daily basis, like, again, our diner example might be here, well, we can put it this way. So let's say we anticipate selling 45 scrambled eggs each day to our different customers, and we're only open, though, 6 days a week. We're closed Monday. That means that we're going to sell a total of 14,000 plates of scrambled eggs through the year, which gives us this sales figure based on our price of $4.92. So before I go to the last section, I just want to show how we can manipulate this a bit. Let's say I am not quite satisfied with that, or let's just imagine that 30% is a little high, and our industry standard is 25%. That lowers our price, which lowers by 20 cents, which means we've now earned about 3,500 less on the year. Same thing if we go up, or let's say we hard code it in again at $5.99. If we think the market will bear that, that brings our total sales up to 84. So this is giving us that ability to really play around with these numbers. Back to our 30 example. The last tab here is going to primarily be outputting information. So one more time, we've got our full list of our variable costs, which now includes that transaction fee. So it's costing us 15 cents for Square or Visa or whoever it is processing the transaction. So it's costing us $3.94 in total for our cost to make these eggs. We're selling them at $4.92. We have $50,000 in fixed costs. What this shows us is that in order to break even, we have to sell 50,000 units of scrambled eggs. Unfortunately, we're not anticipating being anywhere close to that. We're only expecting to sell about 14,000. So that would mean that with our current cost structure, with our fixed costs as they are, and at the price we've set, we would have a loss in this business of $36,000. Now, a couple things to elaborate here. Of course, we want to keep in mind this is theoretical. So in reality, this diner probably sells a bunch of other stuff. They sell cups of coffee, they sell French toast. What are these other items that they're selling to their customers? So if we want to kind of do a bit more of a quick calculation for some of those other things, let's say we're selling coffee, and that coffee costs us 50 cents per unit. We've included an option to add some other items down here. We sell our coffee for $2.50 a cup, and we hope to sell a cup of coffee along with each plate of scrambled eggs. So we're selling about 14,000. Well, now we can see at the bottom here our total contribution margin, 41,000. Now we're only losing $8,000 a year. One last thing, we add in our scramble or our French toast. Maybe that costs us $4 to make, but we can sell it at a much higher price point. We can sell it at $8, and we're going to sell a few less of these because they're more expensive. So maybe we'll only sell 10,000 of those. Now we're in a profit situation. So this gives us the ability to play around with our different items. Now, one more time, I'm just going to reiterate, this is not a perfect number here. It's just to give us an impression or a bit deeper understanding of how these numbers are working. So I think that's the majority of the stuff I wanted to describe on this tool. Actually, the one last thing would be with our sales. So that's, instead of expressing this as just as units, we can tell that to cover our $50,000 in fixed costs, again, with our current variable cost structure, we need to have sales of $250,000 to reach the break-even point where we're not losing any money. All right, so I threw a ton of information at you guys. We've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to quickly return to our slideshow. And let me pull this back up. So some of these assumptions that we've made in doing this, we are assuming that the price of is going to stay the same. We're assuming that your costs are going to stay the same. Again, when we think in reality, the cost of eggs is probably going to go up by a few cents and down by a few cents, give or take, each time you purchase them. So over time, if you're able to do this, capturing averaged information, you'll get a stronger picture. But yeah, we're assuming that that stays constant. We're assuming that all those, all the eggs we can make, we're selling, or if we're doing inventory, we're assuming that everything that we've produced or purchased is being sold. So we want to understand that we have to adjust for that to be more accurate. And yeah, just again, if this, like this is meant to be just that starting point, your situation might be more complex, and you might, hopefully I've kind of given you the indication that, oh yeah, this could be really useful for me, but I want to see it more detailed. An accountant is the right place to go to get that. Reza has asked if you can get a copy of this sheet. Absolutely, that's the purpose here. So you'll all be getting a copy of this. And again, if it's easy for you to run through it the way I've explained it, that's wonderful. If you'd like to set up a time to meet with me where we can walk through your business and put your information in there, I'm more than happy to do that as well. So yeah, we've got some time here for any other questions, and yeah, if there are any, I'm more than happy to take those. And then lastly, of course, I'll give you information on how you can contact me afterwards. So yeah, any questions? I'd be surprised if I was clear enough to get this across to everyone without any question, or hopefully I didn't just cause a ton of confusion. But yeah, that this led to some new knowledge for you, and yeah, that you'll be able to utilize this spreadsheet when Mike distributes it to you guys. If I should also mention, I suppose, if you're watching one of the recordings, which I think it's wonderful getting picked up. So if you're watching this and it's not live, it's a recording, again, reach out to me or Business Link and say I'd like to work on that profitability tool that was shared there, and we'll make sure that that's connected. Considering tax, yeah, that's a good, important question. So again, it would be one of those things that I kind of said, well, maybe that's going a bit beyond our complexity level. But what I would suggest to get at least that impression level would be to put your tax in your fixed cost. So if you've got an operating history and you know what your taxes were on a year previous, and you're looking at a similar volume, you can do that. If you know, we might be able to make a very rough estimate of, if you're incorporated, corporate tax rate for a small business of about 15%. I'm not saying that is a fully accurate number, but you can take 15% of whatever that profit is, go back, add it into your fixed cost, and you'll get an approximation of that number. So those are a couple ways you might consider tax. Again, to get it more accurately integrated would be a little bit more complex, and let's say accountant can help you do that. But that being said, this impressionable type of data can really go a long way to helping you with your decision making, or maybe you're making a decision about whether you want to introduce a new product, and you do have some fixed costs that are specific to that product, and you've got variable costs that are specific to it. This can really help you understand if it's going to be worth your while to introduce it. How much is it going to contribute to your overall profit? You don't need perfect numbers for that. As long as if it's seeing it's close to zero, well, maybe you do want to do some deeper investigation. If it's way above or way below, you might have already led yourself to a pretty strong conclusion there. But yeah, thanks for that question, Reza, about tax. It's important. It's absolutely a cost we have to consider. So those are some ways you might do that. Yeah, so wondering about how, if the costs are all being deducted from tax, how are the whole calculations going to look like before and after. Well, what we want to be thinking about is, your tax as a business is going to be applied to your profit. So you're absolutely right in that your costs are deducted. And there is, again, I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole here, but there's a discrepancy between income for accounting purposes and income for your business purposes. But when we consider that this tool is going to show us our overall profitability, if we're assuming that our variable and our fixed costs are by and large deductible for tax, that tax calculation is going to be on the profit that you'd be taxed on. So, yeah, okay, good. I'm glad that I was able to clarify that. All right, well, that brings us pretty close to the top of the hour. If there are any questions that might arise kind of after here, maybe you go home and kind of digest this a little bit, or as you go through the spreadsheet when you receive it, if you have any questions that arise at that point, here's how you can get a hold of me. I'm happy to talk to you by email, by phone. You'll also get a link or a set of this slide deck as well, and you can follow the link there to just book an appointment with me directly. But any of these ways to reach out to me are fine.
All right, that was a pretty good push there, Mark.
Thanks. Yeah, we're sometimes hesitant about dipping our toes too far into these types of math waters. So I do hope that if you get any feedback from people where it was just, oh, you know what, that was just way too much. I hope that's not the case, but if it was, do let us know and let Mike know, please. But yeah, I'm hoping that there was some benefit derived.
Oh, I think absolutely, and it's the first step, right? You're going to get yourselves an accountant. You're going to probably get yourselves a bookkeeper, maybe not, but yeah, exactly, Riza. It's a good start, and it gets the gray matter churning and starting to think about this stuff. So I thought it was great. I'll distribute the files as Mark gets them to me, and yeah, again, feel free to reach out to Mark. His email is right there. His mobile's there. Geez, here, yeah, you've got a cornered audience. This brings us to the end of the 5-part series, Mark. So I want to thank you and Matt both for delivering this to our community. It's
our
fantastic.
pleasure, for sure.
I will continue to distribute and share this. As we were doing this one, I was thinking about a friend of mine who has a business that she needs every single one of these workshops. So this will be great. I'll share it out. Thank you everyone for joining. Tell your friends, share the links with them. Yeah, we'll pile up those async views. It's, what are we, November 17th today for posterity. So we're in the height of the big second wave of COVID. So all of you take care of yourselves, stay safe, and we will do this again, Mark.
Yes, wonderful. Thanks so much, Mike. Thank you all for joining today. Happy to be a part of it. And yeah, hope to connect again. Best wishes for the future.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.